Okay, Kum Len Black Gemara. This is Sunday's Daf Mem Zayin. Omar Rabbi Yechanan said, Umen ein le chazaka. An Umen has no chazaka, which is what we learned before. An Umen has no chazaka. But Ben Umen, the son of an Umen, yesh le chazaka. The son of an Umen, if he claims that he was there for 3 years, and he had witnessed it for 3 years, and he says that he bought it, we'll believe him. If an Umen says he bought it, remember we had the Gemara before, the Abaye and Rabba, the whole discussion there. If an Umen says that he bought it, and we're talking about a case where there were witnesses, and they saw it by him, then he's not believed to say, witnesses saw that he took it as a repair. He's not believed to say that that I bought it, or that afterwards I bought it. He's not believed. But the son of a Numan is believed. Oris, a sharecropper, same thing, Ein le chazaka, has no chazaka. But Ben Oris, the son of an Oris, yesh le chazaka, has a chazaka. Gazlan, the Gazlan, why you even mention this, quite obvious. The Gemara will explain in a minute. But a Gazlan and the Ben Gazlan, the Gazlan and his son, Ein lehen chazaka, they have no chazaka. But Ben Benoy shel Gazlan, but the grandson of a Gazlan, yesh le chazaka. Now this is a bit perplexing. Why is it that the son of an Urish and all those people who had a right to have it, there's a reason why they happen to have this particular product, so they have no chazaka, because the reason why the owner didn't protest it because you had a right to have it. But the Ben, doesn't have that same right, so therefore if he has it for 3 years and he says, I bought it, we believe him. No, and why can't the Gazlan be so far? Because the father is a Gazlan and therefore the son shouldn't be believed that he bought it? So what's going on here? So I don't understand. Hechler, what are we talking about? If all of the children come and say that we yashin it from our father, and that's why the son of a Gazlan is not believed because your father is not believed, and therefore how can we believe you? Then I feel hanach nami loy. Then the same thing, the son of the Aris, who says I yashin from my father, but your father wouldn't have been believed because he received these goods to repair, so therefore he's not believed that he bought it. And the same thing with an Aris, he had a right to be in the field, and if he's not believed, so why should the son be believed? What's the difference between the son of a Gazlan and the son of an Aris? So if they did not come and say, oh, I inherited from my father, then, but rather that I got it myself, I bought it myself and have a chazaka. No, so I feel Ben Gazlan nami. So then why can't the son of a Gazlan, just because his father's a Gazlan, therefore what, will besmirch the son? He says, I was here for 3 years, I bought it, nobody protested, I lost my shot. Says I'll tell you the case. The Ka'amri Edim. This is the gears of the Rashbam, other different gears. The Ka'amri Edim say Befanenu Hoideloi. We're talking about that what? They all came and said that our father gashed us. But it's talking about when the 80 witness came along and he said that this person who's claiming, this person who's complaining, we heard him say to the father, yes, I sold it to you. So by the case of the Aris, the case of the Uman, the witnesses come along and say, we heard this person who's complaining now, we heard him say to this man, to this kid's father, I sold it to you. Therefore, the son has a chazaka and with a taina, and he's believed. And Haidos Baldin Kimei Eid Dame, we have witnesses. The problem with the Gazlan is, even though the exact same scenario, that we heard this person say to the Gazlan, yes, I sold you the field. But by a Gazlan doesn't prove anything. Why doesn't it prove anything? Maybe he was intimidated by the Gazlan, so just to placate the Gazlan, because the Gazlan maybe threatened him, blackmailed him, as we'll soon see, and therefore he said, I admitted from the Edim that I sold him, but you didn't mean it. And therefore that's not good enough proof. We say to the son, prove that you bought it. If you can't, Chazaka doesn't mean anything here. As the Gemara says, if the guy admitted in front of witnesses that I sold it to the Oris, I sold the woman, he's saying the truth. Why not? In the case of the Gazlan, even though he was made in front of the witnesses, yes, I sold to the Gazlan, proves nothing. Why not? Rav Kahana, like Rav Kahana said, don't Rav Kahana. He loved the maybe he was scared. They threatened him. He was scared, or even even though they might not have spelled it out, but this is what he went through his mind. They sort of threatened him that will take him and his donkey. They'll go to the government and master on them that they have all of these people. They have the beautiful donkey, and they'll confiscate it and make you work for it. So therefore, he got so scared. What else? What these informers, what they can threaten him with. So he's acquiesced. He said, yeah, it's yours. But he didn't mean it. So therefore, the ben of a gazan doesn't work. On my Rava says, Rava, now there's two versions of the Gemara. One version of the Gemara, which Taisa likes better, and the Rajban has as well, is that sometimes the son of a gazan has a chazak. It's not an our Gemara, but this is their version. The son of a gazan has a chazak. You know when? When he comes in and says, my grandfather bequeathed it to me. My grandfather was my father's father. My father was a Gazlan, but not my father's father. And he had Adim that said, that they heard him, this person was complaining, say to him, I sold it to him. And he's saying, I'm here for my grandfather. Then, even though he's the son of the Gazlan, he is believed because it has a chazakah for 3 years. That's one version of the Gemara. Our version is sometimes the grandson of a Gazan also has no chazaka. When? Instead of coming along, if he would have come along and said that I yashin my father, who's the son of a Gazan, he would be believed. Why? Because the son of the Gazan, the son of the Gazan, sometimes the chazaka would help, sometimes it wasn't. If he says I yashin for my father Gazan, it's meaningless. Even if we have Adim that said we heard this person admit to the Gazan that it's his, meaningless. But if the son of the Gazan says, I bought it from you, and I've been here for 3 years, chazaka, and you didn't complain, then he has a chazaka. Just because his father is a Gazan doesn't reflect on him. So if the grandson says, I yashin it from my father, he definitely would have kept it because we have toyin in liyorish. We would say, yes, you were here for 3 years, nobody complained. Your father could have said that he bought it direct from the guy, it's good enough. But what happens if Ben Benoish Gaza Nami in the Chazaka when Hechadamik is going to Koosi Betanos the Abba? The Abu, he says, I yashin it from my grandfather. Those my father yashin it from his father, therefore it's mine. Then you're no better off than the original person, the grandfather, who you would never trust. Hechidami Gazan, what's the definition of a Gazan? That we don't trust. So we have two opinions here. There's the Gemara. Could be a person that, generally speaking, we would trust. But on this particular field, everyone is aware that he is considered a Gazan. We have witnesses or whatever it is. Everyone says on this field is a Gazan, which means that this very Gazan, about any other property, and if he says, I bought it, we would trust him with the Chazakah, but not in this particular case, because on this field he's known to be a Gazan. And Rabbi Chizda says, you're going to buy his ploini shahargin the fashas at least kimamen. Rabbi Chizda says, no, we're talking about a family, a known family, base ploini, this known family, that they are prepared to commit murder at least kimamen just to have more money. Therefore, they can never be trusted on any particular issue. And they're not really arguing, they're just giving 2 examples of what a Gazan is. Tell them what we learned. Umin ein le chazaka. We learned that an umin has no chazaka. An umin has no chazaka. Why? As we said before, because people give you to repair. Now, if you turn around and say, "Oh, but then I bought it," we don't believe you. And you should have kept the star if it's true. Yorad me'umnase. What happens? You're no longer an umin. Yesh le chazaka. Then you do have a chazaka. There's 2 ways of understanding. We're talking about that you received it in the machlekes rishonim. Is it talking about that you're no longer a repairer, and then afterwards you claim that you bought something from somebody and you have a chazaka? Then you believe, because even though you used to be a repairer, you're no longer a repairer. Or even if you quit, you're a repairer, you receive these goods, and then you quit, you're no longer doing repairs. And a long time later, you still have the goods in your possession, and you claim that I bought it. In that case, if it's beyond the normal terms of agreement, the normal times, then we will believe you that you're actually the new owner. Same thing here. Oris ain't chazaka. Oris has no chazaka. but Yorad Marisusai, but if he's no longer Naris, then Yesh Chazaka. Then he does have a Chazaka. Ben Shecholak. What about a son? As we said before, that a son and a father have no chazaka because the son works by the father by the son takes the crop. They're moichel each other. They have a good, very good relationship. But what happens? The son no longer lives at home, and he's no longer, relying. He's no longer a dependent child. He's separate. Or an isha in the garsha, a woman is divorced. Then harei, because while they're married, and then the woman or the husband says, "Oh, I bought this property for my wife," or she says she bought it from her husband, and I've been here for 3 years, didn't throw me off. I kept all the fruits. That proves nothing, because they're married, and if they both share everything, so it proves nothing. But what happened? They're divorced, and she says, "I bought it. I've been here for 3 years." We treat them like any other person. That means there's no love over there. If she didn't buy it, you should have protested. It didn't means that she's telling the truth. Says about Ben Shecholak. Okay, I understand why you had to tell me the case of Ben Shecholak. I would have thought that even though the child is no longer dependent, now independent, still it's a father and a son. So you would have thought that if even the son's there for 3 years, took the entire crop, the father doesn't mind. And therefore, maybe there's no chazaka. So the chiddush is, no, once he's no longer a dependent child, it's not common for the father to give everything away. It's one thing to give, to help out, but to give all your money to the child, that's very uncommon. So therefore, the son has a chazak. Okay. I would have thought you still have a very healthy relationship. So just because the son is there for 3 years taking all the crop, maybe the father was moichel and kind. So come to tell you that's not so. You don't find a case where the father will give all the proceeds to the son who leaves nothing for himself. Elisha is garsha. Pshita, a woman, if they're divorced, obviously there's always animosity between them. Then obviously he's not moichel if he won't let her sit there for 3 years and eat all the take the entire crop for free. Obviously, she's telling the truth. What's the point? We're talking about a case here. The mugareshes, the ain't mugareshes. Talking about a woman that it's questionable whether she was divorced or not. What do you mean questionable whether divorced or not? We learned in Gittin, we had one example would be if the husband tossed the get to her, but Safik Korev Loi, Safik Korev Lo. At the end, we don't know if the get was closer to him, so therefore she's not divorced, or the get is closer to her and she's divorced, and then the get flew away and we don't have it anymore, so you can't give it again to her. Well, in that case, she's a Safik Megareshes until he writes a new get and gives it to her again. And in the interim stage, the Amoraim say you have to continue feeding her. And sometime during that interim stage, she makes this chazak over here. She says, well, I bought it and I've been here for a long time. In that case, we would have thought, even though there's definitely no love over here, because they're waiting for a divorce, but because he has to provide for her in the interim period, maybe he allows her to stay in that on the field and take the entire crop, and that's why he's not protesting. That's what we would have thought. Kamashalan, no, that he definitely would not have allowed her to take the entire crop. And if she has the entire crop, then must be that she's telling the truth and she would. As the more explains right now. When the Chum say Megureshes, when the Chum say that what it's doubtful whether she's divorced, and we need to reissue the divorce in the interim period, the husband has to provide for her. Omar Nachman said, Omali Huna told me, Kulan, all of them, Sheheviu Raya. In all of these cases, the the Oris, all of these cases, if they can bring proof, like Adim or Star, whatever it is, if they can bring proof, Rayas and Raya, then obviously, witnesses are witnesses, or Star is Star. What's he trying to say? We'll see in a minute. Umamidin Sade Biyadim. And we will leave the field in the hand. If they have evidence, they have proof, we will leave the field by them. All that obvious. But Gazlan Sheheviraya, if a Gazlan brings proof that the person sold it to him, Ein Rayos and Raya proves nothing. As we'll soon delineate exactly what this means. The Eimam Midin Sad Biyadim, we do not leave the field in his hand. Why not? Because we said before, already, if Kahana said that people feel threatened by a Gazan, that maybe the person will go and inform to the government about him, what other assets he has, or possessions he has, I'll take it away. So therefore, the fact that we have a riot that he sold to the Gazan doesn't prove anything. Maybe he was intimidated, he was coerced into it, proves nothing. But we'll soon see it. We're going to limit it a little bit. Says what are you coming to tell me that if you sell something to Gaza, it's not really a sale, and therefore the Gaza produces a raya? It proves nothing. Tanina, we learned it in Gittin. Very interesting. This Mishnah we're about to quote here from Gittin is the very same page as Kamsa Bar Kamsa, and the whole story of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, which is right now. Because starting right now, the last 3 days, Zayin Ches Tes, is the most serious days of the 9 days. So what do you call it? Tanina, we learned, we're almost there. Lokach misikrikan. The Mishnah tells us there were 3 stages under the Roman government and how they dealt with Eden. Stage number 1, which is horrific, the Roman government said that any goy that does not kill a Jew at first a possible opportunity, that goy will get killed. So in that case, if a Yid sold a property to save himself, it's actually a valid sale because he really was worried that he will be killed, and he has no recourse whatsoever. The government was backing it. So therefore, when he gave the property away in order to save his life, he meant it, because he got something in return, his life or his family's life. Then the next phase was where they said, okay, you don't have to kill a Yid, but if you kill a Yid, you'll get reward money. You'll get blood money. Again, the Yid knew there was no recourse. They couldn't take these goyim to court because the government was endorsing it, encouraging it. So again, if they gave a property away to this goy in order to spare their life, they meant it. Then phase 3 was where the government said, you shouldn't really kill any Yidden. But nevertheless, they were out there. They weren't giving any rewards, but they were out there. And there was, now the Yidden felt they had some kind of recourse. They could go to court, and maybe the court will back them up and so on. But nevertheless, in a personal situation where the Yid felt that the only way he could save himself if he didn't want to go to court is to give away a property, in that case, we say it's not a genuine sale. Because really deep down, he thought, I'll give him the property right now, leave me alone. Tomorrow, I'll get lawyers, barristers will go to court, and I'll get the property back. So in phase 3, we say the Sikrikan took the property away. It's not a proper sale. And if this Sikrikan had turned around and sold it to a Yid, that Yid has stolen property. So what this Yid did was he went to the original vendor and gave him a few dollars. The land might be worth $1,000. Gave him $100, a token measure, and say, "Hey, now definitely I have a valid sale." And the Mishnah says it's not, because even though the Eid played along, and we're talking about, and we'll see the Gemara later, we're talking about no money changed hands. So the Eid played along only to save himself, and eventually he thinks he'll go to court and get it all back. So that's why by Gazan, a raya is not valid. It depends, as we'll soon see, it depends what the raya is. When we say by a Gazan, the raya doesn't mean anything, excuse me, it depends what the raya is, as we'll see in a minute. So first of all, said, Mike Kamash, you want to tell me that a sale to a Gaza is not a sale? It's a Mishnah in Gittin. Nina, we learned, Lokach misikrikun, let's say the Yid went over this sikrikun to this non-Jew who confiscated or was given property by the Yid in order to save his life. The chazav, the loka balabayis, and then he went to the original owner. He gave him a token, or he promised him whatever. I'm taking the land, and he promised to give him money, but no money changed hands. The deal falls away. So what's the chiddush? What are you trying to tell us? The Gemara said there's a machlekes between Rav and Shmuel, as we'll see in a minute, and that's what we're trying to say. According to Rav, if there was actually a contract that the Yid assigned the property to this Sikrikan in order to save his life, in phase 3, if there's a contract, then it's a proper sale. Rav says, when do we say it's not a proper sale? Well, the Yid says to the guy, take my land, lake, chazek, v'kni, go get it, take it's yours. Then we say he just did it to spare his life, and he wants to go to court eventually. That's his plan, and to retrieve his land. That's Rav. Shmuel says no. Even if you documented it, it's all part of his ploy. He just wants to appease this guy. He shouldn't kill him, but he intends to go to court, and he knows the court will realize straight away that this document is worthless, a worthless piece of paper. So when I said over here at Gazlan, I want to negate the view of Rav and follow Shmuel that even if it's documented, even though it brought a strong raya, a document, a star, it's not a proper sale. Says the Gemara, the reason why we mentioned this Gazlan is Lafuka to exclude Rav or negate Rav's opinion. Omer Rav said, Lo Shanu El Noma Lechadekini. Only if it's a Lechadekini. Avol Bishtar Konev, he documented it and he gave it to the guy, not because he wanted to, but he wanted to save your life. It's a proper sale. Kamash Malan, he wants to teach you like Shmuel. The Omer At Bishtar Nami Lakani, even the star you're not going to. Add unless unless you voluntarily add in the document that if that property ever gets lost or taken away, you're going to give the guy another property. The guy never asks you for that, because they feel they're so confident that they're going to keep the property, not worried. So the fact that you put that in means that you actually want to make sure the sale is a tight sale. So then you meant it. However, Rabibi continues, Messiah, he concludes. So that's what Rab Nachman said in the name of Huna. But now Rabibi continues what Rab Nachman said, which Rab Nachman didn't say here. Rabibi Messiah Mashmeid Rab Nachman. Rabibi then continues there Rab Nachman. In other words, according to Rab Nachman, the way we have it right now, the Gemara will spell it out tomorrow's Gemara, if the goy gave money to the Yid, even though the Yid did it to spare his life, it's a valid sale because the Yid didn't lose anything out. And even though he didn't want to sell, But now that he sold it, he sort of resigned himself to the fact that it was a sale. He got something in return. That's what Rav Nachman holds. Comes along Rabibi and says, no. Rabibi says that even if money changed hands, there's no sale. And therefore, if this Yid who bought it from a Sikrikun, loses the property, the original owner has to reimburse him the money that he paid. So what Rabibi is saying here, I hold that even if money changed hands, even if the original Yid who was forced into it received money, does not resign himself to the fact that he sold it. It's not a sale. And it's not a sale. And therefore, he, he has to give the money back to the Yid when he takes the property back. So here we have this machlekes. Rabibi says, lost the place. Rabibi Messiah Rabibi explained here Nachman. He has no property, but he has money. No, but he has to give the money back to the Yid because there was no sale here at all. When is all this said? That what? That you give back the money and the sale is not a sale. Sha'amru Edim b'fanenu monoloy. When the Edim say that the Gazlan then counted to the Nigzul, and he gave him the money, or he wrote the star. We saw that, and we saw that it was that the money was changing hands. If the Edim say that we saw the Nigzul being moide to the Gazlan, that he received them, in other words, we had to see, when do we say that you have to reimburse and give the money back if the Edim said we actually saw money changing hands? We saw the money changing hands. So then there was money involved, but the deal is not a deal because according to Rabibi, if you were coerced into it, nothing happens, even though you received something in lieu, and therefore you have to reimburse money. But if the Edim said, we didn't see any money change hands, but we heard the victim say, yes, and he gave me money for the land. That's all part of the show because this Yid is scared and he had to say, oh yeah, he gave me $1,000 because the God said, you better say it, tell everybody that I bought it. So make it look real, make it look credible. So the fact that the guy was murdered, that he received money for the property that was confiscated from him, proves nothing. That doesn't prove that money changed hands at all. He doesn't have to pay any money. Like Rav Kana, because why did he say then? Because like Rav Kana, Rav Kana, he loved the oidele. He was so worried that if he's not murdered, he's threatened that he'll be taken off to the to the government and be informed on. So he had to play along. He gave the land, and he had to tell everybody that he received money in his place. So we have a machlekes Rabbi Bibi and Rav Huna, which we can talk about in a minute as well. Where according to Rabbi Bibi, even if money changed hands, it means nothing. And according to Rav Huna, it means it's a valid sale if you receive money. In a nutshell, there's a big argument in the Sivis, the Tzas, and everything else. We say we're going to learn the Gemara now that if you force someone to sell something, is it a proper, and you receive money in its place? Do we say it's a proper sale? Let's just do the next few lines. I'll come back to it. Talayu, they hung him up. They strung him, literally means they strung him on a tree. And vizabin, and they made you, hey, you want to live, sell it. Zvin, it's a proper sale. Because he received money. My timer, cold, very interesting logic, he says it. And we'll go through in a minute. In a nutshell, okay, so we see that if you have forced sale, it's a proper sale. The question is, what about if somebody forced you to buy something? Not to sell something, but if somebody forced you to buy something, is it a proper sale or not? Is it a proper sale or not? Just like a forced seller, we say that at the end of the day, he resigned himself, okay, I got money in this place. What about a forced buyer? You force someone to buy this item, whether you like it or not, and pay money for it. But you got an item in this place. Do we say, okay, he resigned himself, it's a proper sale or not? Big machlek is nachrein, civic trust and others. But in a nutshell, the question is as follows. Who is the main, in every transaction, who is the primary, who does the main part of this transaction? The seller or the buyer? Because there's two ways of understanding it. One way of understanding it is that the main purpose of a kinyan is if something belongs to me, how do you release this item from my ownership? How do you take it out of my ownership? The purpose of the kinyan is to take it out of my ownership, and now it becomes like hefker, and the other person then automatically, he's standing there, it becomes his. So the main purpose of the kinyan is to take it out of the vendor. It's the makna that makes the main part of the kinyan, and the koiner just has to agree to accept it, or no. The main part of the kinyan is to become the owner. That's the main part of the kinyan, is the buyer. So the Gemara says there, you can force a seller to make a sale, as long as you can force a seller to make a sale, according to Rav Huna. If the main party of the kinyan is the one that sells, then surely a buyer you can force to buy. Madach in a case with a person who has to go ahead and make the kinyan and sell it, and yet he was coerced and controlled, and more than that, threatened, and you're telling me that if he receives money, he receives something in its place, it's a good kinyan, then surely somebody who buys something, who's forced into buying something with the part of his input in the transaction is minimal, surely it's valid. But if you learn that the main person involved in every transaction is the one who buys it, not the seller. So all we know is that we're limited to a seller. You can force the seller to sell, but doesn't mean necessarily you can force the buyer to buy. Now, but Rav Bibi says, so Rav Huna says, if you receive money, you're happy to be a seller. Rav Bibi says, no. Even if you receive money, you're not a happy seller and there's no sale. What's the logic of Rav Bibi? The logic is very simple. Rav Bibi says, every seller is a buyer. You're telling me that when is it a sale if he receives money? So the seller has to be kind of the money. So while he's a seller, in order to be a seller, you also have to be a buyer. I'm selling you this object, but I'm buying the money. But Habibi says you can't force someone to be a buyer, because I hold that the buyer is the main part of a kinyan, and the seller is the easy part. And since every seller has to be a buyer, and you cannot force someone to be a buyer, therefore there's no sale at all, even though receive money in its place. But Rav Huna says that no, that the main thing is the selling. And if we can force someone to sell, surely we can force someone to buy. And therefore, if you receive money, even though you're buying it, but that's a minimal input. The main input is the selling, giving up something. And therefore, we can force someone to sell. Anyway, sorry, I got a little distracted there. Let's go back to Gemara here quickly. So what's the logic of Rav Huna? What is the logic of Rav Huna? Rav Huna. You know why? Very interesting logic. Rav Huna says, generally speaking, why do you sell anything? Why do you sell? Most people, when they sell something, is because they need the money. You're selling your house because you want to move to another house and you need money to be able to buy the other house. You're selling your field because you want to move somewhere else. Most things when you sell because you need that money to be able to do something else with it. So every time when you sell, you're being coerced. It's a forced sale, and yet that's life. That's how you make sales. So therefore, what's the difference if you're selling because the money is forcing you to sell? You're desperate for money, or a guy stands there with a gun and forces you to sell. It's the same thing, and that's why he said it's a valid sale. Does the Gemara? My time, what's my logic? Called the masman inish. Anything a person sells, he loved the others who wouldn't have been forced to it. Love him wouldn't have sold it. I feel hachi, yet the law is vina is vina. It's a valid sale. So the same thing over here. Says the Gemara, I don't see the comparison. Shiny oinsa the nafshema oinsa the achrini. Don't you see the difference the Gemara says between if you put yourself in that position, okay, you need the money, but it's my decision. I had choices. And I'm desperate for money. I wanted to so I made a decision that I'm going to sell. Over here, I had no choice. Somebody else pointed a gun at me and said, you better sell. How can you compare the two? Why should that sale be a valid sale? Ella, of course, I'll tell you where. I'll show you that coercion does work. In Tanya, we learned Yakriv Oisoi. It says in the pasuk regarding if you made a promise, a vow to bring a carbon oil, and then it says in the pasuk Yakriv Venu, we're going to force you. It says in the pasuk Yakriv Oisoi, we are going to force you to bring the carbon because it says Yakriv Venu, bring it. Why is it Yakriv Oisoi? Melamid Shekoifen Oisoi. We're going to force you to abide by your promise. We're going to force you to bring it. We're not talking here about a carbon chatas or asham because there we don't force. The fact what's going to motivate you to bring the carbon is you want an atonement for the avera you ate. You ate treif, whatever it was. But over here, you made a promise, a vow to bring an oil. We're going to force you to bring the oil. Yachol, we would have thought bal karchoy. So if you can force, that means even against the person's will. Talmud Laim, it says in the very pasuk, Yakriv oisay lir tzaynai. It has to be willingly. How does that work? Hakate said, how is that possible? So koifin oisay, the famous words, ad sheyomer reitzani. We force him until he says reitzani. Big machlek is showing whether he actually has to say those words reitzani, or he just behaves as if it's reitzani. So again, we see clearly from here that we can force a carbon. It's a valid carbon. Same thing here by a sale. So maybe it's different. The Dilmashayna Hasam the Nichale, maybe there's different. Tele Kapara, he's happy to fulfill his promise, because if he doesn't fulfill the promise, he'll be doing an Avera. So this Kapara here is not like a normal Kapara that he already did an Avera and we need atonement. This is to prevent an Avera. So he shouldn't in any way breach his promise. So it's different. That's why it's valid. But who says over here? Elam is safer. It says the same thing applies to the get a divorce by a woman. If a man, a recalcitrant husband, refuses to give a divorce to a woman in a case where the law says that he has to give a divorce, koifin oisa, we even had a machlek where Yavam is if a person is married for 10 years and they didn't have any children, whether we force them to divorce or not. But here it's talking about, let's say he's married to a mukashrin where limbs fall off and you can't, and in other cases where they shouldn't be living together, we force the husband to divorce her. We force the husband to give a get until he says ani. So we see clearly that a forced agreement is valid. The same thing when it comes to a sale of land. Says him again. The dilma shiny hasad, perhaps there is different than mitzvah l'shmoya different chamim. In the case where they must give a get, the chacham said therefore, as the Rambam explains, every Jew has a neshama, more or less. I'm paraphrasing, and wants to do the right thing. And therefore, just what his exterior, or he has, his conscious level doesn't want to. So when you force him, you bring out his true self, and the true self says, yes, I want to do the right thing. I want to do what the Chacham say. Ela Svaru, it's a logical thing. Agav Oinse, because once he is forced, in a situation is forced, Gomar or Makne, he makes up to say, you know what? I will do the right thing, and I will be Makne, I will sell it. I'll agree to the sale. I don't want to, but now that I'm forced into it, I'll already agree. So just one more thing about the get. Says the Gemara, Moisiv Rabbi Yehuda, get Hamu'usa B'Yisrael. If the rabbis in a bezin get together and determine that this man must give a get to his wife, based on halacha, obviously, just in Stam the world you can't do that, but based on the halacha says in this case you have to divorce. if he's abusive or whatever the case is, kosher. That even though it's a forced get, and we know that you cannot force a get, it has to be done willingly, that get is kosher. Uva'akum, but if you go to a Goyish court and the Goyish court rules that you have to give a divorce, puzzle. It is puzzle. Uva'akum choyv, but if a Jewish bezin rules that the man has to give a divorce, and the husband refuses, and the bezin has no teeth, the bezin can hire goyim to beat the yid up, and they should just merely be the sticks of the bezin in order to force this man to give a get to his wife. But and the goyim have to say, I want you to do mashi yisrael oimelach, what the yidden are telling you. Big machlekes in Rishonim whether that's actually the halacha or not. Now the question is, why? Hasam nami nemo agav oinse gomer megarish. Why are you telling me that goyim cannot force? You're telling me right now that a forced sale. He I guess he accedes to that, and then he does it. He agrees, and you're telling me. So why if goyim? They're not acting on behalf of bezin. You go to a goyish court. The goyish court rules you must give a get, otherwise we'll put you in jail. Why shouldn't that be a valid get? We just said that if you're coerced, why do you need a bezdin? You just said that if somebody is coerced, eventually, reluctantly, he'll agree and just do it so he doesn't get in trouble. So why shouldn't a goyish court be good enough? So Gemara says, didn't we learn? Omar Rav Mishashi. Rav Mishashi said, Devar Torah, according to halacha, afilu ba'akum kosher. Even goyim can force a get. A goyish court can say, give a get. Matam Omru ba'akum posel. So why did they say that goyim can't go give a get? So then what happened is any woman wants to get divorced will go to a goyish court and get a divorce without finding out without the halacha or whether you can try to fix up the marriage, whatever it is. She will go directly to goyim and undermine the whole institution of marriage. Now, this Rav Misharshir is actually the Gemara in Gittin Daf Pecheses, if you remember, Bedusihi. The Gemara says the Bedusihi or Berusihi, which means either it's false or it's nonsense. What part of it? Not the last part. What part of it is that he says that according to the Torah, if a goy forces a man to give a get, it's valid. It's only the Rabbanan made a special gezerah. The Gemara says it's nonsense because we learn from a pasuk. You can only go to a Jewish court. You cannot go to a Goyish court at all for anything. And therefore, a get that a Goyish court determines has to be given is not accepted at all according to the Torah. Nothing to do with this. Yet this Gemara here brings this down. So there's a big argument in halacha. The Rambam learns that because of this Gemara, he rejects the Gemara in Gittin and learns this Gemara here. That Mahat Torah, it is a valid get, and therefore some of the things that are happening where they rely on Goyish courts getting involved and all these different things is relying a little bit on the Rambam. But from the other Rishonim, they say no, this Gemara is completely repudiated, and therefore Mahat Torah, a Goyish court cannot. The question is the other part of Akum Chayv. If the Bezdin makes a ruling that has to give a get, and then the bezin allows, let's say, the woman or the man, whatever is the one that's being affected, and the other person doesn't want to issue a get, doesn't want to receive a get. The bezin then has a right to. Does the bezin have a right then to send them to court and let the court force that other party to either receive or give the get? Otherwise, threat of incarceration. Is that considered like an extension of the bezin, where it's said akum chayv, and this is all the controversies that are being discussed everywhere. Okay, this is Sunday's Gemara. See you next time, Mitzvah Shem.